Montana Territory, late October 1878. Snow had fallen early that year, thin at first, but steady, like the land itself was trying to quiet everything down before winter took full hold. Outside a small clapboard church on the edge of a half-forgotten town called Gabriel Creek, a young woman stood shivering in the cold. Her clothes were too light for the weather, a fraying dress layered over a threadbare shawl that did nothing to stop the wind from cutting through her like glass. Her boots were soaked through. She had no gloves. Her hands were tucked beneath her arms, chin down, eyes fixed on the ground. It was near sunset, and the church bell had just finished its final toll. Everyone else had cleared out. No one looked back. Until he did. The cowboy came from the opposite side of the street, his boots crunching against the frost-laced dirt. His hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow, but his eyes were steady. He had the kind of walk that did not rush, but never lingered long enough to be doubted. His long coat flapped behind him in the wind as he crossed toward her. He stopped a few feet in front of her, looked at her a second longer than most men would have. Then, without a word, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked up, startled. Her face was pale and pinched from cold, lips trembling. Her cheeks were raw from wind. She had the kind of beauty that had been through too much to care about being seen. "You all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. I will be." He crouched slightly, eyes level with hers. "You got anyone coming for you?" She shook her head. "You from here?" Another shake. He sighed once, slow through his nose, then straightened. "Name's Oran Prescott," he said, voice low but sure. "I was just passing through, heading west before the pass freezes over." She looked down again, but her fingers held his coat tighter around her. He watched her a moment, then said, "Careful, want a new start?" She looked at him like she was not sure he was real. "I do not mean anything you do not want," he added quickly. "I just mean, I got an extra horse tied up and enough supplies for two. I do not know your story, but I reckon if you are out here shivering alone, it is not one you want to keep living." She blinked hard, tears threatening. She bit the inside of her cheek and nodded once. He nodded too. "All right then. What's your name?" She hesitated, then said, voice quiet but clear, "Cassia Penrose." "Well, Cassia Penrose," Oran said, stepping aside and holding out a gloved hand. "Let's get you warm." She hesitated again, then placed her hand in his. They rode out together an hour later. Oran had found her a pair of dry socks from his saddlebag and helped her into a second pair of boots he kept for winter trails. She never asked why he had them. He never asked why she had been standing outside that church alone. They rode in silence most of the way, side by side. The sun dipped behind the hills. A few stars blinked out in the darkening sky. Her breath came steady now, and she held the coat around herself like armor. They made camp near a creek, Oran building a fire with practiced ease. He did not crowd her. He just handed her a tin plate half full of beans and hard bread, then sat across from her, chewing quietly. Finally, she spoke. "I was supposed to marry a man in that town," she said. "We wrote letters for a year. Thought he was good. He was nothing but cruel when I got here. Hit me the second day. Took my money. Said if I left he would find me." Oran looked at her. His face did not change much, but his jaw clenched. "I waited until he was out hunting," she said. "Ran to the church. I thought maybe someone would help." "No one did," Oran said flatly. She shook her head, eyes on the fire. "They should have," he said. She looked at him then. Really looked. His eyes were a warm brown, steady and calm. His face was hard in places, softened in others, like he had been through things but never let them rot him out. "Why did you stop?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because you looked cold. Because I have known what it is to stand outside and hope someone sees you." She blinked. "Did someone see you?" He nodded. "Once. Man named Luke. Gave me work. Taught me how to ride and shoot and fix a saddle. Kept me fed until I could feed myself." She looked into the fire again. "I do not know what I can even offer. I have nothing left." "You do not owe me anything," Oran said, voice firm. "I do not want anything from you but the truth of what you want." She was quiet for a long time, then whispered, "I want to feel safe." "You will," he said. "I promise that." That night, they slept near the fire, a few feet apart. Oran kept watch most of the night, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the trees. Cassia slept curled in his coat, her breathing slow and even for the first time in days. In the morning, she helped him pack up without being asked. They rode west again, toward a stretch of land he had once passed and never forgotten, a quiet valley tucked between two ridges, with a small cabin he had built years ago but never stayed in for long. As they rode, Oran glanced over at her. Her hair was a mess, her face still pale, but her back was straighter now, her eyes clearer. "You all right?" he asked. She looked at him, a smile just barely forming. "I think I will be." The valley opened beneath them 2 days later. The trail had narrowed at parts, winding through stands of pine and over shale ridges, but Oran had known the way by memory. The cabin stood where he'd left it, tucked against a rise with its back to a stone bluff, a small barn sagging nearby. The roof held through the summer storms, though one shutter hung crooked. Smoke hadn't curled from the chimney in over a year. Cassia stepped down from her horse with stiff legs. She hadn't spoken much since sunrise, busy watching the horizon. Her eyes moved often, not with fear now, but with caution honed by habit. Oran tied off the horses and handed her a tin cup of creek water he'd filled upstream. She took it with a nod, drank slowly, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "You built this?" she asked, glancing at the cabin. "Started it 6 winters back. Never stayed longer than a few weeks." She leaned her shoulder against the post beam. "Why not?" He unlaced the packs from the saddle, setting down a sack of oats and a wrapped roll of jerky. "Didn't have a reason to." Cassia didn't answer right away. She stepped inside, the wooden door giving a soft scrape over the threshold. The one-room space held a narrow cot on one side, a stone hearth with a rusted kettle hanging near the back wall. Dust clung to the floor, and the windows showed streaks from old rain. A carved shelf still held a folded blanket and a tin of matches. She laid a hand on the edge of the table. "You kept it ready." Oran stepped in behind her, ducking slightly beneath the lintel. "Always meant to come back. Just didn't expect company when I did." Cassia gave a quiet sound in her throat, not quite a laugh. She ran her fingers along the blanket's edge. "You want me to take the bed?" "You'll take it," he said without hesitation. "I'll rig a pallet near the fire. Kept me warm plenty of nights before." She looked at him then, and this time her gaze didn't flinch or shift. "I'm not used to being offered kindness without a price at the end." Oran set the kettle over the hearth hook. "Not asking for anything." "I know." She paused. "That's what unsettles me." He crouched to strike a match, coaxing the flame into the kindling. The fire caught slow, small curls of smoke twisting upward. When he straightened, she was still watching him. "You fix fences for a living?" she asked. "Sometimes. Break horses, too. Guide work through the passes in spring. Whatever earns honest coin." She pulled her shawl tighter and stepped toward the hearth, letting the heat reach her boots. "I taught letters to children once. In Missouri. Before everything changed." He didn't ask what that meant. He only nodded. "You want to teach again?" "I don't know yet." She crouched near the fire, palms out. "I liked it. But I was a different person then." "You're still you," he said. "Just scarred some." "Nothing wrong with that." She looked down at her hands. The skin was chapped, nails broken short. "Hard to feel like myself anymore. But I suppose that's part of starting over." He didn't answer, just added another log to the fire. That night, she took the cot without protest, curling beneath the blanket without removing her dress. Oran laid out his coat and saddle blanket by the hearth, one arm behind his head, listening to the wind against the shutters. She didn't speak again before sleep took her. In the morning, she was already outside when he woke. The sun hadn't crested the ridge yet, but she was standing near the barn, sleeves rolled, trying to lift a rusted bucket from the well crank. Her hair had come loose in the night, catching in the wind. He pulled on his boots and crossed the yard. "You trying to work before breakfast?" he asked, taking the crank from her. "I was thirsty." He filled the bucket and handed it over. She drank deeply, then splashed the rest over her arms, rubbing away the grime. She looked fresher. Not clean, but less burdened. "I can help mend that shutter today," she said, gesturing toward the cabin. "And sweep the floor. You don't have to earn your keep." "I'm not looking to be kept," she said. Then, gentler, "But I do want to belong somewhere." He nodded once, then turned toward the barn. "Rafter beams cracked. If we fix that, maybe you can start a garden come spring. I don't know much about planting. We'll learn it together." She didn't answer, but when he looked back, she was still watching him, and this time, her eyes stayed steady. By the 3rd week in the valley, Cassia had learned the rhythm of the place, not rushed, but never idle. Mornings began with the kettlebell clanging against the hearthstone as Oran stirred the last of the embers into flame. She'd rise without prompting, pull on her shawl, and step into the cold to fetch water. Their movements had settled into something quietly mutual. Not chore for chore, but effort matched without speaking. Late one morning, they were stacking juniper logs behind the cabin when Cassia paused, leaning on the end of the split rail. "I don't hear birds here the way I did back east," she said. Oran glanced toward the tree line. "They'll come with thaw. This time of year, it's mostly crows and hawks. My mother used to say if you saw a redbird in winter, it meant someone you lost was watching over you," she said, eyes unfocused. "I haven't seen one in years." He didn't answer right away, just handed her another length of wood. She set it in place. "I never asked about your family," she said, brushing her hands on her skirt. "Not much to tell," he said. "My mother passed before I was old enough to keep her voice in memory. My father left before that." She nodded, not with sympathy, but recognition. "You ever think about leaving the territory?" she asked. "I thought about Arizona once," he said. "Too dry. Thought about Oregon, too. Couldn't get settled nowhere." She studied his face. "So what made you stop writing?" He looked at her then, long enough that she felt it in her chest. "Some things are worth stopping for," he said. The wind pressed through the trees behind them, rattling the limbs. That afternoon, they rode out to check the line where the fence met the northern bluff. A section had collapsed where a mule deer had likely forced through. While Oran hammered new rails into place, Cassia walked the slope, eyes on the ground. She crouched near a patch of disturbed earth. "Tracks here. 2 sets." He stood beside her, nodding. "Young buck and a doe. Probably came down for water." She straightened, brushing her palms together. "I never fixed anything before that could stay fixed. Feels strange." He leaned on the post driver. "You've got a good eye? You'd do fine with stock if we get a few goats next season. I wouldn't know where to start. I'd show you." She didn't speak, but her expression warmed with something unspoken, a quiet trust beginning to root. That evening, after supper, she stepped into the barn with a lantern while Oran stayed out with the horses. She found a pair of worn bridles hanging on the far wall and a cracked leather satchel tucked behind a beam. Inside were folded papers, brittle from age. She turned one over carefully, revealing a pencil sketch of a young man on horseback. Oran, younger, hair longer, face still searching for something. She didn't call out, just folded it back and set it where she found it. When she stepped outside, the sky had turned the color of ash and coal, stars just beginning to pinprick through. Oran was brushing down his gelding, the animal calm beneath his hand. "I found a drawing in the barn," she said. He didn't look up. "Luke's daughter made that. I was 17. She was good. She wanted to go east to learn proper. Never did. Married young." Cassia leaned against the barn wall. "Do you regret not staying where you were?" "I didn't belong there," he said. "Not really. Folks were kind, but I was always just someone passing through." She was quiet for a while. "Then, I used to think belonging meant staying in one place. But maybe it's more about the person beside you." He turned toward her fully now, lantern light catching the edge of his jaw. His voice was low but didn't waver. "Wouldn't mind if you stayed." Her reply came soft, but certain. "I wouldn't mind either." The silence between them wasn't empty, it held something steady and alive, like the ground beneath them had finally stopped shifting. Neither reached out, but something passed between them anyway, sure as the moon rising behind the ridge. Inside, she folded the blanket at the foot of the cot and turned down the corner, not out of habit but intention. Oran checked the fire, added a log, and stood with one hand braced on the mantel. "You said you liked teaching," he said. She met his eyes. "I still do. If a child ever comes here, I reckon they'll be better for having you." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "You thinking of children?" He nodded once. "Not now, but someday, with the right person." Cassia stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing with purpose. "I'd want that," she said. Oran reached for her, then not hurried, not hesitant. His hand found hers, rough palm against hers, warm and sure. For the first time in a long while, her shoulders eased without effort. Outside, the wind settled. Inside, the fire held. By mid-November, frost stayed thick past noon, and the creek behind the cabin had begun to edge over with ice. Cassia had taken to carrying wood in her apron, her fingers red and cracked from cold and work. The air in the valley had a silence to it that didn't feel empty, just waiting. So did she. One morning, Oran returned from setting snares to find her at the table, sleeves rolled, sewing a thick patch onto the seat of his trousers. She glanced up only once, then back to the stitch. "You split these hauling that beam yesterday," she said. "Couldn't leave them hanging like that." "Didn't notice," he said, setting his gloves by the hearth. "You wouldn't," she replied, knotting the thread. She tied off the last stitch, then folded the fabric neatly. Oran watched her hands. There was care in the way she did things now, not out of duty, but something steadier. "Were you ever married?" she asked, not looking at him. "No." She nodded like she'd expected it. "You ever come close?" He shrugged, easing down onto the bench beside her. "I thought once I might. But she wanted town life." "I didn't." "Did you love her?" He waited a beat before answering. "Not enough to stay where I didn't belong." Cassia turned the mended trousers over once, then set them aside. "I was married," she said. "For 8 days. Oran didn't move. He told the preacher he'd give me a home and a name. I believed him, but I think he only wanted someone to blame." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands tightened. "I broke a plate the second night. He said it meant I was careless. When I cried, he said I was weak. When I got quiet, he said I was ungrateful." Oran didn't speak. He didn't reach for her hand. He just waited, still and grounded beside her. "I left before he could break more than dishes," she finished. "You did right," he said. She stood then, walked to the window. The glass was clouded with breath. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, light and drifting. "I want to be useful here," she said. "Not just safe. Useful." "You already are," Oran said. "But if you want more to do, there's a shed behind the barn full of tools I haven't touched in a year. Pick through it. See what makes sense to you." She turned from the window. "You trust me with that?" "I trust you with everything here." She didn't answer, but her eyes held to his like she was trying to memorize the shape of that truth. The shed was sagging, but dry inside. Cassia spent the afternoon sorting through what remained: a dull draw knife, a broken-handled spade, a small box of bent nails. In the corner, she found a rusted tin of seeds wrapped in oilcloth. The label was smudged, but she could make out turnip and bean. She brought it to Oran at dusk. "These still good?" He turned the tin in his hand. "Might be. Come spring, we'll try." "I'd like to learn how to make things grow," she said. "You will," he said, smiling with his eyes more than his mouth. Later, as they sat near the fire, Cassia reached for the sewing basket, then paused. "I've been thinking," she said, "about how people used to stitch initials into their linens. Not for vanity, just to mark what was theirs." Oran watched the flame shift. "You want to mark something?" She nodded. "Not out of pride. Just to know what's mine now." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small, worn pouch. From it, he took a thin strip of leather, rubbed smooth at the edges. "I carry this," he said, "as a reminder of the man who helped me years back. He gave me a place to sleep and a reason to stand up straight." Cassia looked at the strip. "What'll you do with it now?" He held it out to her. "You keep it. Stitch your name through it. Or both of ours, if you want." She took it slowly, as if it might vanish in her hand. "You sure?" she asked. "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't." Her fingers closed around the leather, and for the first time since she'd come to the valley, something in her seemed to settle not just in her bones, but deeper. That night, she stayed by the fire after he turned in, thread in hand, needle moving slow. It wasn't about claiming anything. It was about belonging not to him, but beside him. When she finally lay down, her breath was calm, her eyes steady in the dark. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, the warmth held. A steady thaw came just after the 1st of March. It didn't happen all at once, just a slow loosening, like the land was remembering how to breathe. The snow pulled back from the rock edges first, then the tree roots, leaving behind damp earth that smelled of pine and iron. Cassia stood barefoot in the doorway that morning, her toes pressed into the cold boards. She could hear water running under the crusted snow, the creek waking up beneath it all. Oran stepped out of the barn with a coil of rope over his shoulder. He paused when he saw her, then tipped his hat back with one finger. "You're going to catch your death, standing like that." "I'm checking the ground," she said, not moving. "For what?" "For whether it's ready." He came to stand beside her, boots thudding softly. "It'll never be ready all at once." Just starts softening in patches. You find one, you work from there. She looked up at him then. That how you lived most of your life? Close enough. Cassia stepped back in and pulled on her boots. I want to clear the plot near the south fence today. I saw green under the ice yesterday. If I start turning it now, it might take root better come planting. He watched her lace the boot tightly. I can help after I mend the tack. I'd rather do it myself, she said. I need to. He nodded, then pulled the door closed behind him without another word. By late afternoon, her arms ached and her back felt pulled tight from the waist down. But the plot was cleared, stones piled to one side. Frost churned through with the spade until the earth gave way like it had just been waiting. She stood over it, dirt on her skirt and under her nails, watching a crow circle low above the trees. When Oran brought her a can of water, she drank half in one go and poured the rest over her hands. I forgot how good it feels to be tired from something honest, she said. He leaned against the fence. You've been working straight since mid-morning. I didn't notice the time. Then you did it right. She laughed, soft and surprised. He didn't say anything else, but he watched her longer than usual before heading back toward the cabin. That night, she stayed up after the fire had burned low, sitting at the table with a book open in front of her. It was a tattered almanac Oran had picked up from a trapper along the past 2 winters back. She traced the planting chart with one finger, lips moving as she read. I'd like to try growing squash, she said when he sat down across from her. And onions, if the ground's not too stubborn. Oran nodded. We can barter for seed at the post in town. I'll ride in next week. She looked up. I want to go with you. You don't have to. I know. I want to see what's changed. I want them to see me. He considered that. You think he's still there? I don't know. And I don't care. Oran leaned forward, arms crossed. If it turns out he is, I'll be beside you. You don't have to say a word. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. He didn't answer, not because he doubted her, but because he believed her completely. They rode to Gabriel Creek 3 days later. The trail was muddy and uneven, but the horses kept pace. Cassia held her chin steady, eyes forward. The town looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she'd just grown past it. They stopped at the general store, where the clerk, an older woman with silver streaks in her braid, watched Cassia with a long, quiet gaze before nodding once and handing over the pouch of seed without a word. On the way out, Oran said, You all right? Cassia adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Feels good, she said. Like I've stopped carrying something I didn't need anymore. They didn't stay long. There was nothing left to say to the buildings or the people. They rode out by sundown, the sky going dusky pink behind the hills. Back at the cabin, Cassia knelt beside the plot and pressed her hands into the soil. I've carried so many endings, she said. It's strange to hold a beginning. You're not holding it alone, Oran said, crouching beside her. She looked at him, her hair loose around her shoulders. I know. He reached into his coat and took out a small cotton bundle. Inside were 2 plain gold bands, dinted slightly from age. They were Luke's, he said. He gave them to me when I left. Said I'd know when to use them. Cassia's breath caught, but she didn't look away. Oran took her hand. I've never asked you for anything, but I'd like to ask now. Will you stay, not because you have to, but because you want to? She closed her fingers around his. I've already stayed. I just hadn't spoken it yet. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and her heart steadied beneath it. They married a week later, alone under the budding branches of a cottonwood by the creek. Oran carved their initials into the trunk, low enough to find again. No preacher, no guests, just a vow spoken into the wind and kept every day thereafter. That spring, the garden took root in earnest. Squash vines stretched wide, and the onions held firm. Cassia stitched new curtains from an old feed sack, and Oran built a second chair for the porch. In the evenings, they sat shoulder to shoulder, boots touching, watching the light leave the sky in long, slow swells. One night in early June, as the warm breeze carried the scent of wild mint from the hills, Cassia leaned her head against Oran's shoulder. I've never known peace like this, she said. He laid his hand over hers. We made it. That's why. And they did. Season after season, they built a life from the quiet things. Mended fences, shared meals, a home that no longer echoed with absence. Cassia planted more each year, and Oran raised a small herd of goats that came when he whistled. They never spoke much about before. They didn't need to. It lived behind them, small and silent, as they went forward together. Years passed, and the cottonwood thickened with rings. The carving faded, but they remembered where it lay. The cabin never needed more than it had. The land never asked more than they gave. And in every way that mattered, Oran and Cassia lived the rest of their days in love. Fully, quietly, and entirely.